Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Mandy's Corner. Come on in, pull up a seat, relax, and let's get into some Down Home Ghost. Okay guys, before I get started though, I just want to kind of explain something. Y'all may notice I look a little different. I'll probably have to explain this for every video and every stream for the next couple of weeks until I completely heal. In other words, anytime I'm on camera. But, you know, if some of you saw, I think it was Mandy's World a couple of weeks ago, I explained I'd had some health problems. And part of it was associated with my POTS. Part of it turned out to be something else. Shingles, actually. Go figure, huh? I didn't think I was old enough for that yet. Come on. But it caused some spots on my face, my body to get really, really dehydrated and crack open. That's what the POTS did. And then when the shingles set in, it caused new spots that just got worse. And we had thought my eyes were part of the POTS issue. And come to find out, it wasn't. It was actually the shingles. So they're still healing, as you could see. And right there is almost completely healed. This is still healing. Most of the rest of the spots have healed except for a spot on my leg. But because my eyes are still not quite right, my eyelids, I didn't want to put makeup on them. So I just, you know, put a little makeup on everywhere else, but no eyeshadow, anything like that. That's a shame too, because I had some really pretty new eyeshadows on to play with. But just in case anybody noticed they were looking a little funny, I wanted to explain that. I'm actually a little worried they may scar. Hopefully not. Fingers crossed. But okay, enough of that. Let's get down to business. Time to talk about some spooky stuff. Okay guys, this story actually takes place in a small town on the northern border of Alabama. But it starts in another small town just across the state line in Tennessee. Okay, as I've told you guys before, these stories are ones that are supposedly true, and they're either told to me by the people that experienced them or by reliable sources, put it that way. And most of these people don't want their real names out there, so I do change the names. So I haven't even thought of names for this one yet. Okay, I got it. Okay, our story begins with a girl in Tennessee named Anna. Anna had a brother and a couple of friends. Her brother's name was Bob. Their friend's name was, let's call him Crow. And they were really fascinated by the paranormal, extremely fascinated. And ever since they were kids, they had heard about this place just across the Alabama line. And it was simply referred to as the tunnels. They'd always been curious, and one night, you know, they had all just graduated high school a few months before. They were getting a taste of what it was like to be out on their own. Anna and Bob shared a place. Crow was a regular visitor, along with Anna and Bob's younger brother, David. Well, on this particular night, they're sitting around having a drink, like, you know, most young kids who are getting out on their own do. And after several drinks, they think they're brave enough to go check this place out. So, they all pile into Anna's car, with the exception of David. David wanted to go see his girlfriend. Okay, so be it. Well, Anna, Bob, and Crow make the 30-minute drive to a small town just across the Alabama line. And in fact, they didn't even really make it into the town itself because the tunnels were just on the outskirts of town. It was around 2 o'clock in the morning. They were feeling good. They were young. You know, wonderful night. They were listening to their favorite music, cutting up, thinking they were going down there just to give each other a few scares, you know, nothing serious. Well, they get there, and Bob directs Anna to park her car on one particular spot on the side of the road. And what these tunnels were basically just that. They were tunnels in the side of a hill for cars to pass through. Anna wasn't sure why he wanted her to park in that particular spot. She just assumed that it was to be out of the road in case any traffic came, which she doubted would happen because they were in the middle of nowhere. Well, she parks and they get out and they walk. She parked probably maybe 100 yards away from the entrance to the tunnel. They walk first to the small tunnel. When they get there, Anna couldn't help but notice the graffiti all over the tunnel walls. It was obvious kids had been going down there doing things they really shouldn't. There were several references to devil worship, to gangs, to... You guys have seen graffiti. You know what it is. She looks at it all for a minute, really doesn't think much of it, and then they walk a little further on down to the big tunnel. There's even more graffiti, but hardly any of it is gang related or, Susie loves Joey or any of that. It was almost all related to some sort of satanic worship. She thought that was a little strange, but kind of wrote it off. Bob and Crow laughed about it. And Crow said that a kid at school had told him that if you stood in the middle of the big tunnel and said, "I'm not scared of you," that's when things would get interesting. So, that's exactly what all three of them did. They stood in the middle of the tunnel. "I'm not scared. You don't bother me. Bring it." Well, they got quiet and they listened and they looked around, and admittedly they saw a few shadows move here and there that creeped them out, but hey, that was just their imaginations working overtime, right? Well, they decide it's getting late, and Anna and Crow did have work the next day, so they decided to make their way back to the car and go home. They had just made it out of the big tunnel when they heard this wind just come rushing through the tunnel toward them. Admittedly, it was creepy, but it was a tunnel. Any little breeze was going to sound like a freight train coming through. So they just keep walking. They get to the little tunnel, and there's a breeze coming toward them, with the breeze from the big tunnel coming behind them. That made no sense. Then Anna saw it. A tall, dark figure standing in the middle of the small tunnel. At first, she thought maybe it was some more kids that had come to, check out the old legends. But she didn't know any kids that could be that tall. She swore this figure was at least 8 foot. And he slowly turned to look at them. And they all three realized this was no kid. In fact, it was no human. It looked like it might have been human at some point, but that had been long ago. This creature looked half human and half demonic. And not in the way like you see on TV. He didn't have horns sticking up. It was just the features and the distortedness of them. Anna said it was too hard to explain. Well, they decide it's time to go. The creature starts to run toward them. The only hope they have of getting out is straight through him. They break out in a run. As he's running toward them, they're running toward him, but they're trying to stay to the sides of the tunnel. Bob ends up over on this side, Anna and Crow on this side, running faster than they've ever ran in their lives. As they passed him, they could all feel a burning sensation on the sides of their bodies that were toward him. They didn't bother to stop to look. They did not care at that point. They sped up. They finally came out the other side and made it to the car. Once in the car, they jumped in, and this time Bob jumped in the driver's seat, Anna in the passenger seat, and Crow in the back. As Bob fired up the engine, they realized they hadn't come out of the tunnel alone. The figure was standing in front of the car. Bob didn't know what to do. He threw the car in reverse and then slammed on the brakes. Anna demanded to know, "Why are you stopping?" "He's behind us," was Bob's reply. Anna turned slowly to look out the rear window. Sure enough, there stood the figure. Crow was freaking out. "Bob, just drive the damn car. Drive now." So, Bob decides, can't go backward, let's go forward. That would send them straight through the tunnels. He gunned it. Off they went. The entire time, the figure stayed right against the bumper. It was almost as if he was riding on the back of the car. But they knew that wasn't possible. As they left the big tunnel, Crow screamed, and the figure disappeared. They still didn't stop, not until they were in town. Once in town, they stopped to see what was wrong with Crow. They pulled into a gas station and got out into the lights by the pump. There they could see the back of his jacket was clawed. It was a denim, a black, kind of like the acid wash denim jackets from back in the day. It had claw marks down the back of it. So deep they had went straight through the denim into his shirt and scratched the flesh on his back. The three of them were too tore up to go to sleep. They were scared to be alone. They certainly were not ever going back to those tunnels. So they went to Crow's mom's house. They knew it was almost time for Crow's mother to get up for work. So they thought, okay, we'll just swing in, tell her we wanted to stop by and visit for a minute. Maybe tell her, hey, we're too tired to drive home. See if she'd let them crash there. They got there. Crow's mom, as always, was a sweetheart. She made them breakfast. She talked to them for a while. And then she looked them dead in the eyes and said, "Cut the crap and tell me what you kids did." Anna shook her head. "We don't want to talk about it." Crow's mom looked at her very calmly. "Well, you're going to." Reluctantly, the trio told Crow's mother everything. She listened patiently, and when they were done, she looked up at them with a look of fury on her face. "You should never mess with the supernatural, especially there." Crow told her, "Mom, we thought it was just old superstitions, old legends." And that's when she told her own story. Turned out, the legend of the tunnels had been going around since she was a kid. It also turned out she knew what the creature was. and how he ended up there. How did she know? Because her parents had been around at the time he was created. Come to find out, the creature actually used to be human. Now, Anna refused to say his name. She said nobody will say his name. And she asked me not to as well, so I'm going to give him the name Henry. Henry had been a slave. It had been a hard life, but he was a good man. Through everything he was put through, he was still a good man. And eventually, he ended up with a slave owner who was merciful. He didn't believe in beatings. He didn't believe in working the slaves until they dropped. And eventually, he didn't believe in owning slaves anymore at all. He freed his slaves. This enraged some of his neighbors. They started to track down the freed slaves. They were going to take them. They were going to put them back into slavery or punish them. Henry tried to hide in the woods. Of course, the tunnels weren't there at this point. But he knew the woods in that area very well. So that's where he tried to hide. Unfortunately, they found him. They found him and they hung him. And then they buried him in an unmarked grave in the exact spot where Anna had parked her car. Apparently, the injustice of not only his life but his death finally broke Henry. In death, he became angry and bitter, enraged. And around that time, several kids started going to the tunnels. He'd been there for years and years and years, that rage just building and building. These misguided kids went there playing with things they did not understand. He fed off of this, and he fed off of their fear. He used what they were doing to transform himself into something more than human and more than spirit. And that's the way he had stayed for years. Angry at everyone and everything, determined to make everyone feel the same pain and anger and frustration and fear that he had felt in those last moments of his life. The kids were floored to hear this story and a bit disturbed. Bob very cautiously asked Crow's mother, "What was your family doing there, participating in this?" She shamefully ducked her head. She said it was a different time, a different era. They sat in silence, absorbing what she had told them, her absorbing what they had told her dealing with the demons of her own family's past. They finally drifted off to sleep. Crow's mother called in to work, called in sick, so she could stay home and watch over them while they slept. Later that day, Anna gets a phone call from her other brother, not David or Bob, but from Billy. Billy was younger than the rest. He was still living at home with Mom and Dad. And he called her and asked her, "What did you do last night? What happened? Are you okay?" She told him she was fine and wanted to know how he knew anything happened. He said, "The thing, did it get you?" She was stunned. "What are you talking about?" And he proceeds to tell her about a dream he had the night before. His dream was everything that was happening to her, Bob, and Crow at the time. Okay, guys, we're going to finish this one next time because there's actually a second part to this. Other people got involved. And yeah, we're going to finish this one next time. But for now, I'm going to get out of here. If you enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up. If you're so inclined, hit that subscribe button as well. If you do, don't forget to hit that little bell to get your notifications. If you're catching this over on Twitch, consider dropping me a follow. And if you do, hit the bell over there too so you get notified every time I go live. Alright, guys. For right now, I'm out of here. And, don't go speaking about Henry. Bye, y'all.